The world felt like it had come to a standstill as I stood at the altar, my heart pounding beneath the satin layers of my wedding dress. I couldn't help but feel the weight of every gaze in the room, the elders, the pack members, and the one person whose eyes I couldn't meet. Maximus Storm, the son of the man who had tormented my family for years, was now the man I was bound to, by blood, by duty, and by the curse of a contract I never had a say in. His gaze was cold, calculating, as if he too understood the fate we had been handed. The truth was, I was being married to him for one reason only, to solidify a truce between our warring packs. Our families had been enemies for generations, a blood feud that had cost both sides countless lives. But now there was no escape from the inevitable. Our union was meant to bring peace. But the coldness I felt from Maximus wasn't what unsettled me most. No, it was the gnawing sensation deep in my gut, the feeling that there was something I was missing, something important. I wasn't naive. I knew I wasn't marrying the man I loved or even liked, but I didn't expect to feel this hollow. Every inch of the room seemed to suffocate me, the air thick with a tension I couldn't understand. As Maximus reached for my hand, I stiffened, the strange pull between us growing stronger with every passing second. He wasn't just an enemy's son. There was something else, something hidden beneath the cold exterior, something I couldn't place. And when the priest spoke the final words, sealing our fate with a kiss I didn't ask for, the world seemed to shatter. The moment our hands met, an electric charge shot up my arm. I flinched, but Maximus didn't react. His grip was firm, resolute, like the hand of someone who had been trained to conquer. Yet I couldn't shake the coldness radiating from him, even as the priest instructed us to face one another. His eyes were like ice, yet there was a flicker, something deeper, something more primal, that I couldn't quite understand. The ceremony continued in a blur, the words falling into a monotonous drone. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground, not daring to look up, afraid that if I did, I might see something I wasn't ready for. "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I didn't hear my own voice as I whispered the words I had been conditioned to say. A forced agreement, a pledge made under duress. But what else could I do? My family's survival depended on this marriage, this delicate union between two warring factions. I had been groomed for this moment my entire life, though I had never anticipated feeling this hollow. Maximus's eyes never left mine as he recited his vows. His lips moved, but his voice was detached, as though the words meant nothing to him. I had expected him to be cold. After all, he was the son of the man who had ruthlessly destroyed my family, but there was something almost emptier about him than I could have ever imagined. The final words were spoken. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest's voice echoed, and before I knew it, Maximus leaned forward, placing a cold kiss on my lips. It was a brief, mechanical gesture, devoid of affection or even the faintest hint of tenderness. It was over. And yet, it had only just begun. The banquet that followed was lavish, a spectacle of grandeur designed to showcase the success of our union. The walls of the grand hall gleamed with golden light, crystal chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble floors. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and yet, despite the celebration, I felt nothing but emptiness. I sat beside Maximus, his presence a constant weight at my side. The sounds of the festivities faded into a dull hum as I focused on the uneasy silence between us. His gaze was focused elsewhere, on the pack leaders, on the alliances being made around us, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was palpable, suffocating, and it wasn't just from the forced union. There was something else, something more personal. "You should eat," he said, his voice low but with an underlying command. I looked at him for the first time since the ceremony, really looked at him. His features were sharp, his jawline strong, but there was a coldness in his eyes, a hollowness that I couldn't place. Maximus Storm, the son of my father's enemy, was a man built on control. His posture was that of a king, yet something in the way he carried himself made it clear that even he wasn't entirely in charge of his own life. "I'm not hungry," I replied, my voice betraying none of the turmoil swirling inside me. He raised an eyebrow, a fleeting smile dancing on his lips. It was the first time I had seen any emotion from him, though it was barely a glimmer. "You will be," he said cryptically, before turning his attention back to the pack leaders. As the night wore on, the laughter and music continued, but I could barely focus. My mind raced with questions I had no answers to. Who was Maximus, really? What did his cold demeanor mean? And why did I feel this strange pull toward him despite everything? I excused myself from the table, my legs unsteady as I made my way through the crowd. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the heat inside, but it did nothing to ease the unease settling deep in my chest. I leaned against the cold stone of the castle's balcony, looking out over the darkened landscape. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale, ethereal light over the world below. It was beautiful, unforgiving. I was reminded of the wolves that roamed these lands, fierce, untamable, my family's enemies. And now I was married to their heir. A figure appeared beside me, his presence as commanding as ever. Maximus stood there, his silhouette a shadow against the moonlight. "I didn't think you'd leave so soon," he said, his tone devoid of warmth, but with an edge I couldn't ignore. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. The pull between us, that strange connection I couldn't explain, seemed to intensify. His eyes flickered with something deeper, something raw, but I couldn't decipher it. "I needed air," I said, trying to steady my breath. "You've done your duty," he said, his voice smooth and cold, though his eyes, those golden eyes, seemed to burn into me. "Now you'll learn how to be a proper wife." The words stung more than I expected, but instead of retreating, I stood my ground. "And what does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm. Maximus's gaze softened just a fraction. He stepped closer, his towering presence overwhelming. "It means everything," he replied. "Your duty to me, to this pack, to the moon itself." Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of wolves howling in the distance cut through the night. The sound was primal, haunting, and yet there was something familiar about it. A chill ran down my spine as Maximus's expression hardened. "It's time," he murmured. And just like that, the spell was broken. The night passed in a blur of unfamiliar rituals, strange customs, and whispered words that I couldn't quite make sense of. But one thing remained clear. Maximus was not the man I had thought he was. There was something ancient, something untamed, beneath the surface, and I would learn what that was, even if it meant uncovering secrets I was never meant to know. Chapter 2. The Secrets Beneath the Moon. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of obligations, expectations, and silence. Maximus and I remained largely apart, each of us playing the part required for the truce between our families. But even in the midst of our feigned unity, there was an undercurrent of something that I couldn't ignore. The castle, once bustling with the energy of the union, now felt strangely empty. The great halls, with their tall, imposing stone walls, echoed with the faint sounds of footsteps and hushed whispers. The grand ballroom where our wedding had taken place now stood abandoned, save for the occasional servant or guard who passed through. It was as though life had left the place, and in its absence, an unsettling stillness took over. Maximus spent most of his days with the pack leaders, meeting, negotiating, ensuring that the promises made were honored. I too had my duties, though they were more ceremonial than anything else. The women of the pack, many of whom were once my rivals, now looked at me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. They had been the ones who had fought for the favor of Maximus's father, and now, with the power dynamics shifting, they regarded me with a quiet contempt. But it wasn't the pack members who occupied my thoughts. It was him, Maximus. His absence seemed more oppressive than his presence. Every time he was near, I felt the magnetic pull between us, that strange connection that still lurked beneath my skin. I couldn't explain it, but it was there, constant, relentless, like the moon's pull on the tides. It was on the third night after our marriage that I finally saw him in a different light. I had been restless all day, the weight of our union bearing down on me, and I found myself wandering the castle's gardens, hoping to escape the suffocating walls. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its silver light over the well-manicured hedges and blooming roses. The scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to close my eyes and inhale deeply. But then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, steady, purposeful. My pulse quickened. I opened my eyes to find Maximus standing at the edge of the garden, watching me with a look that was impossible to decipher. "You're out late," I said, trying to steady my breath. "I could say the same about you," he replied, his voice low, with an edge that seemed to slice through the night air. There was something different about him tonight. His posture was relaxed, almost unguarded, but his eyes, those golden eyes, seemed to shimmer with a strange intensity. I felt drawn to him, as though an invisible thread was pulling me closer, but I resisted, my instincts telling me to keep my distance. "Why do you always look at me like that?" I asked, unable to suppress the question any longer. Maximus's expression softened, but only slightly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. The silence between us grew thick, and I could feel the tension coiling tighter in my chest. "You've felt it too, haven't you?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. How could I? He was right. I had felt it. This strange connection that seemed to burn between us, like a fire waiting to be ignited. But I didn't understand it. Not yet. He took another step closer, his body now mere inches from mine. "The moon calls to us just as it calls to all of us," he said. "And it's stronger now, stronger than it's ever been." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Maximus let out a long, slow breath, his gaze hardening. "I am the Alpha, the true Alpha," he said, his voice laced with a dark, untamed power. "The one fated to lead this pack, to lead all of us. And you—" He paused, his eyes flickering with something that almost looked like regret. "You were never supposed to be a part of this." His words hit me like a physical blow. I took a step back, trying to process what he had said. "What do you mean, I'm your wife? This union is not a choice," he interrupted, his voice low and rough. "Not for either of us. But that doesn't change the truth. I am bound to this pack by blood, by fate, by the moon." The air between us seemed to crackle with electricity, and I could feel the ground beneath me shift. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely audible. Maximus's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "You're not just married to me because of the truce between our families. You were chosen By the moon, by the very forces that govern our world, you and I are bound together whether we like it or not. I took another step back, my mind racing. The pull I had felt, the strange connection between us, the inexplicable tension. Was it all true? Was this really fate? You think this is fate? I asked, my voice rising. That I had no say in this? That I'm just a pawn in your game? Maximus's eyes darkened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of emotion, raw, powerful and dangerous. Fate is not kind, he said quietly, but it is not something we can escape. The following days were a blur of conflicting emotions. Maximus seemed to be everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. When he was near, the pull between us was undeniable, and yet, when he wasn't, the silence felt louder than ever. I spent my time wandering the castle, getting familiar with my new life, its rules, its boundaries, and the hidden tensions that simmered just beneath the surface. But as the days passed, I began to sense something more, something that had been there all along but had only now begun to reveal itself. I had never believed in fate, never believed in the idea that the universe could control our lives so completely. But as the moon rose higher in the sky, I began to wonder if there was truth to what Maximus had said. And if there was truth to it, what did that mean for us? Maximus and I continued to move in a dance of necessity, our roles clearly defined, but the deeper connection between us only grew stronger. Despite the animosity, despite the hatred that had existed between our families for centuries, I could not deny what was happening. Something far greater than us was pulling us together, and whether I was ready for it or not, I was about to find out exactly what that meant. Chapter 3: The Mark of the Alpha. The days following my confrontation with Maximus were a blur of confusion and unspoken words. The castle felt even more oppressive now, the silence between us heavier than ever. The pull between us, undeniable, strange and terrifying, lingered in every interaction. His presence became a constant weight on my shoulders, a reminder that I was married to the son of my family's enemy, yet also bound by forces neither of us fully understood. Maximus had made it clear that we were not just a political alliance. There was something more, something ancient, something that linked us, not just in marriage but in destiny. I couldn't ignore the truth in his words, though it terrified me. I had been chosen by the moon, by fate, to be with him. I had spent years learning about the world of wolves, of packs and bloodlines, but this was something beyond what I had ever been taught. The moon had long been a symbol of power and control in the wolf world, but now it felt like a curse rather than a gift. Maximus kept his distance after that night in the garden, but I could feel his eyes on me from across the room, from the other end of the hall. There was a palpable tension that hung between us, thick enough to suffocate. He was a man of few words, and his silence spoke volumes more than any conversation could. His gaze was cold, calculating, but there was something else in his eyes, something deep and primal that I couldn't look away from. The full moon rose on the 7th night after our wedding, and with it came a shift in the air. I had learned enough about werewolf customs to know that this was no ordinary night. The moon, in all its glory, held power over the wolves, especially the alphas. But tonight it felt different. The energy in the castle had changed, as if something was awakening. Maximus had been quieter than usual that day, his eyes dark and distant. He had excused himself early in the evening, claiming he had duties to attend to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. I decided to go for a walk in the gardens again. The cool air helped to clear my mind, though the unease in my chest only grew. The garden, though peaceful in the daylight, seemed different at night, shrouded in mystery, as if it too was hiding something. I walked deeper into the maze of hedges, the path winding further from the castle. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows along the stone walls. The air smelled of earth and wildflowers, but there was something else beneath it, a familiar yet foreign scent that sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could react, a figure appeared in front of me. My breath caught in my throat as I saw Maximus standing there, his back to the moon, his silhouette bathed in its pale light. His posture was tense, his shoulders hunched as though he was struggling with something. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Maximus didn't turn to face me immediately. Instead, he seemed to be staring at the moon, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. It was as if he were looking through it, as if he could see something beyond it, something I couldn't understand. "The moon calls to me," he finally said, his voice low and almost distant. "I can feel it." Inside me, there was a rawness in his tone, something I hadn't heard before. For the first time, I saw a crack in his stoic facade. He was more than just the leader of the pack, more than the son of my family's enemy. There was something primal beneath it all, something I had only begun to scratch the surface of. "Maximus," I whispered, taking a cautious step closer. "What is happening?" He turned to face me then, his golden eyes gleaming in the moonlight. The intensity in them was overwhelming, as though he were looking right through me. He reached for my hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through me, more powerful than anything I had felt before. "The moon is calling me," he repeated, his voice trembling slightly. "And you are part of that call. You are my bond. My fated mate." My breath caught in my throat as the words sank in. He was not just saying this to me because we were married. No, it was deeper than that. This was fate. This was the moon's decree. The night air thickened with the sound of distant howling. Maximus's grip tightened on my hand, his muscles tense as if fighting against something within him. His golden eyes flickered, shifting between human and wolf, and for the first time I saw the true weight of the alpha within him, the beast that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. "The pack feels it," he murmured, almost to himself. "The alpha in me is awakening. It's been dormant, until now. I could feel it too, the pull, the force between us, stronger than anything I had ever experienced. It was magnetic, undeniable, and as much as I wanted to fight it, I couldn't. My heart beat faster in my chest, sinking with his, as if the universe was aligning us, drawing us closer. "Maximus," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What does this mean for us?" He pulled me closer, his breath ragged, his pulse quickening in sync with mine. "It means that we are bound, in ways you don't yet understand. The Alpha's bond is not just physical, it's spiritual. And you—" His eyes darkened, his grip on me tightening. "You are mine, whether you accept it or not." His words hit me like a tidal wave. I was his, the Alpha's mate, the one the moon had chosen for him, and I was powerless to stop it. The air crackled with energy as Maximus shifted in front of me, his clothes shredded as his body morphed, his muscles expanding and contorting, his bones cracking as he became the creature he was always meant to be. His wolf, massive, powerful and breathtaking, stood before me, his golden eyes fixed on me as though he could see into the very depths of my soul. I stood frozen, my heart racing, my mind reeling. I had known the stories of the wolves, of the Alphas, but standing before him, before the beast who was my mate, I understood the true weight of what it meant to be bound by the moon. Maximus, now fully in his wolf form, let out a low guttural growl, and I instinctively took a step back. He didn't move, his gaze unwavering, "You will learn to accept this," he said, his voice rough, resonating with the deep guttural growl of his wolf. "You will learn to accept me." The rest of the night passed in a blur. Maximus returned to his human form, but the raw intensity of the experience stayed with me. I had seen the wolf, but more than that, I had felt the bond, the unbreakable tie that had been forged between us by something far older, far more powerful than anything either of us could comprehend. The days that followed were filled with a deepening tension. Maximus and I shared fleeting moments, intimate, charged with the intensity of our bond, but there was always a wall between us. It was as though we were both fighting against something we couldn't control. But one thing was certain: I had never felt more alive, and I had never felt more trapped. Chapter 4: The Beast Within. Maximus and I remained strangers trapped in the same house, bound by a force neither of us fully understood but both of us felt, an invisible thread tugging between us, pulling us toward something inevitable. The bond of the Alpha, forged under the pale light of the moon, was growing stronger with each passing day. I could feel the changes in myself, subtle, insidious. It wasn't just my heart that raced when Maximus was near, it was my very blood. I could feel it, that ancient energy coursing through me, wrapping itself around my every thought, every movement. I was becoming something more than just a wife to him. I was becoming something tied to his soul, to his destiny. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, thick with tension. Maximus, once the cold son of my family's enemy, was now a man I could neither understand nor ignore. His presence was intoxicating. Every time he entered the room, the space seemed to shrink, and I was pulled toward him, against my will, against everything I had been taught. Elders, and ensuring that the pack was following the new directives, now that he was the Alpha. But every now and then, I would catch glimpses of him as he passed by, his eyes meeting mine in a brief, almost painful exchange. He never spoke. He didn't have to. His presence alone spoke volumes. The full moon was approaching again, and with it came an undeniable sense of urgency. I felt it in my bones. The moon's power was unlike anything I could explain, and I was becoming more attuned to it with each passing day. It was as though the earth itself was shifting beneath us, responding to the same ancient forces that tied me to Maximus. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the sky, I found myself wandering through the castle's gardens once again. It had become my refuge, my place of solace. The night air was cooler than usual, and the scent of jasmine filled my senses, but tonight there was something more, something in the wind that made my heart race. The trees seemed to whisper, their leaves rustling in a language I couldn't understand. As I walked deeper into the garden, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, steady, purposeful. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to find Maximus standing at the edge of the stone path, watching me. "Maximus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I had grown accustomed to his presence, but it was always like this, an electric charge in the air that made every nerve in my body tingle. He didn't respond at first. His eyes were fixed on me, his expression unreadable. And then, in a voice that was low and gravelly, he spoke. "You've been avoiding me." I felt a sharp pang in my chest at his words. I had been avoiding him, hadn't I? But how could I not? The connection between us was undeniable, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with him. "I haven't been avoiding you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I just need time to process everything." Maximus's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "What is there to process?" he asked, his voice almost a growl. "We are fated. This bond between us, it was never a choice." I took a step back, my heart racing. "I never asked for this," I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. He reached out, his hand gently brushing my cheek. The touch sent a wave of heat through my body, and I couldn't suppress the shiver that ran down my spine. His golden eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "You don't have to ask for it," he said softly, his voice hushed with a quiet intensity. "The moon has chosen us, and there is nothing we can do to fight it." The air seemed to crackle around us, and in that moment I could feel the weight of the ancient bond pressing down on both of us. I wanted to pull away, to escape the overwhelming force that threatened to consume me, but I couldn't. Not when he was this close, not when his touch felt like it was awakening something deep inside me. Before I could say anything else, Maximus took another step forward, closing the distance between us. His lips hovered just above mine, his breath warm against my skin. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low and almost desperate. "The pull, the bond, the way the moon calls us together, you can't deny it any longer." I wanted to resist, I wanted to push him away, but my body betrayed me. I could feel the heat radiating from him, and the undeniable connection between us flared to life. My heart thudded in my chest, my pulse quickening. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The kiss came without warning. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't tender. It was raw, fueled by the primal energy that surged between us. His lips were demanding, forceful, as though he was trying to claim me, mark me as his, in ways both physical and spiritual. For a moment, I let myself surrender to it. I let myself be swept away by the fire that burned between us. I had fought against it for so long, but now I couldn't. Not when every cell in my body screamed that this was where I was meant to be. But just as quickly as it had begun, the kiss broke. Maximus pulled away, his breathing labored, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite name. "I will never let you go," he whispered, his voice filled with an intensity that left me breathless. "No matter how much you fight it, you are mine." The world seemed to shift around us, and I stood there, unable to move, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and desire. I didn't know what to make of what had just happened. The kiss had been more than just physical. It had been an awakening, a call to something deeper, something primal. And I couldn't deny it. Not anymore. Maximus stepped back, his gaze lingering on me for a moment longer before he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there, my mind spinning. The days that followed were filled with tension, each moment between Maximus and me charged with the energy of what had transpired. But we never spoke of it. We couldn't. Not when the weight of the Alpha bond, of the moon's call, hung between us like an unspoken truth. I could feel the changes happening within me, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I was becoming more attuned to Maximus, to the pack, to the wolves that surrounded us. I could hear their howls in the distance, feel the pull of their energy, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see the faint glow of the moon, calling us together. The bond had taken root in my soul, and no matter how hard I tried to fight it, I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer just a pawn in a political game. I was part of something far greater, something that neither Maximus nor I could control. And as the moon rose higher in the sky, I knew that our fates were sealed. The Alpha bond, the wolf within him, and the power of the moon were all tied to me now. Chapter 5, Under the Moon's Watch. The days following our encounter in the garden were like a slow unraveling of everything I thought I understood about myself, about Maximus, and about the world we now inhabited. The bond between us, undeniable and suffocating, had taken root within me. It pulsed through my veins like a living thing, a force far greater than anything I could resist. Maximus's presence loomed over me at all times. Even when he wasn't near, I could feel him, his absence like a heavy weight on my chest. I spent my days in the castle, wandering the corridors, struggling with the emotions that surged through me at the slightest thought of him. But it was the nights that were the hardest. The moon, always present, always watching, seemed to pull at me like a string, drawing me closer to Maximus. I could feel its power, feel the weight of it on my shoulders. The truth was inescapable. I was bound to him, tied not just by the marriage, but by something deeper, more primal. The alpha bond was real, and with each passing day it grew stronger. The next full moon was approaching again, and with it the anticipation in the air grew thicker. I knew it would be another test, another night where the pull of the moon would challenge me, would challenge everything I thought I could control. Maximus, ever the enigmatic figure, had been more distant than usual. He'd spent the day locked away in his chambers, his voice low and clipped when he spoke to anyone. The weight of the pack's responsibilities was clearly on him, and I couldn't deny the sense of power he carried now, even though his shoulders were often stiff with the pressure. I had tried in vain to busy myself with tasks, keeping my mind occupied, my hands busy, but the pull to him was constant. It was all-consuming. There was no escaping it, no escaping the way his presence seemed to haunt every corner of the castle. Tonight, however, something was different. Maximus's absence wasn't just a physical one. There was something in the air that made me uneasy. The very atmosphere seemed charged, as though something was about to happen, and deep down, I knew it had everything to do with the bond between us. I found myself standing at the edge of the garden again, the moon now high in the sky. The winds had picked up, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The night felt heavy with expectation. I had barely even registered the movement until I heard the soft crunch of gravel beneath heavy boots. Turning sharply, I found Maximus standing just a few feet away, his figure bathed in moonlight, his eyes glowing with an intensity I had never seen before. "Maximus," I breathed, my voice low and almost trembling. I wasn't sure if it was from the wind or from the flood of emotions that his presence always seemed to evoke in me. He didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on me with such intensity that I felt as though he could see into the very depths of my soul. The air between us seemed to thrum with energy, as though every molecule in the space was charged with the bond we shared. "You feel it too," he said, his voice deep, rough with barely contained emotion. "The pull, the call of the moon." I nodded, unable to speak. It was more than just the pull of the moon, though. It was something deeper, more visceral. The way my heart seemed to beat faster whenever he was near, the way my body responded to his presence, as if we were two pieces of a puzzle destined to fit together whether we liked it or not. Maximus stepped forward, his gaze never leaving mine, his steps sure and purposeful. He reached out, and for a moment I thought he might touch me, but he paused, his hand hovering just inches from my face. The tension was unbearable. "The time is coming," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. "The alpha bond is strongest on nights like this, when the moon is at its peak. We're no longer just husband and wife, and we never were. The bond between us runs deeper. It's a part of me, and now it's a part of you." I swallowed hard, struggling to process his words. The weight of what he was saying, of what had been happening all along, pressed down on me. "And what does that mean for us?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Maximus stepped closer, his body now just inches from mine. The air between us was electric, crackling with the force of our bond. "It means you're no longer just an ally, a political tool in this war between our families," he said softly. "You are mine, just as I am yours, and the moon's power is what ties us together. There's no escaping it." I shook my head, trying to step back, but my feet seemed glued to the earth. The intensity of the moment, of his words, held me in place. "I never asked for this," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I never asked to be tied to you, to this fate." He didn't step back. Instead, his gaze softened, though there was still a hunger in his eyes, a darkness that seemed to pulse with his every breath. "You don't have to ask," he said quietly. "The moon has already chosen us, and that choice is final." The night passed in a haze, my mind unable to focus on anything other than the bond, the pull between us, the truth that had been revealed. Maximus's words echoed in my head, their weight pressing on me. The alpha bond wasn't something I could fight. It was a part of me now, as much as it was a part of him. The moon had bound us, and that was a truth I couldn't escape. The days following were no less intense. I spent my time wandering the castle, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, but it was impossible. Every room, every corner of the place seemed to pulse with the connection between Maximus and me. His presence was a shadow I could never outrun, his gaze a constant weight upon me. A week later, as the full moon once again rose high in the sky, the air seemed even heavier than before. Maximus had grown more distant in the days leading up to the night. His attention was consumed by the pack, his duties as Alpha weighing on him. But every time our paths crossed, the tension between us only grew stronger. The bond, now undeniable, was more than just a connection. It was a pull that neither of us could ignore. That night, as the moon hung full and bright in the sky, Maximus sought me out once again. This time, however, it wasn't just to speak of fate. It was to confront the bond we shared, head on. He found me in the garden again, under the same silver glow of the moon. I stood alone, my heart racing, as I stared up at the sky. The pull was stronger tonight than ever before, and I knew that this was the moment where everything would change. "Maximus," I whispered when I saw him approach. My voice, though low, seemed to echo in the stillness of the night. He stopped just in front of me, his eyes never leaving mine. "It's time," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The bond between us, it's fully awakened. And I need you to understand that there is no turning back. There is no escaping this, not now." As the moon's power reached its peak, everything around us seemed to fade. The pull between us was undeniable, overwhelming, and for the first time I understood the gravity of our bond. I couldn't fight it any longer. The moon had chosen us, and with it, the fate of our packs, our families, and ourselves was sealed. Maximus stepped forward, his golden eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity. "I have waited my entire life for this," he said, his voice low and almost reverent. "For you, and now we must face this together." Chapter 6. The Price of Power. The days after the full moon passed in a haze of confusion and raw emotion. I couldn't escape the tension that now existed between Maximus and me. The bond, once an abstract concept, was now a living, breathing force, wrapping itself around my heart, my soul, my very being. Each time I saw him, the pull became stronger, more undeniable. The connection that I had tried so hard to ignore, to push away, was now something I could no longer pretend didn't exist. Maximus had changed since the night under the moonlight. Though he still carried the weight of his duties as Alpha, there was a certain distance in his demeanor that hadn't been there before. He was more guarded now, more withdrawn, as if he were preparing for something. Something neither of us was ready to face. I too had changed. The moon's influence had seeped into my veins, and with it came an understanding I couldn't quite explain. I could hear things I never could before. The soft rustle of the wind through the trees, the faintest murmur of voices in the castle halls, the low growl of wolves in the distance. It was as though the world around me had come into sharper focus, each sound, each sensation heightened to an unbearable degree. I had become attuned to the wolves, their presence, their power, their connection to the land. But it was Maximus I couldn't ignore. His every move, his every breath seemed to reverberate through my very soul. Maximus sought me out on the 10th night after the full moon. The air was thick with anticipation, the moon once again hanging high in the sky, its silver light illuminating the world below. But tonight, there was something different about the moon, a foreboding presence that seemed to weigh heavily on the castle, on the land itself. I was walking in the garden, as I often did when I needed to clear my mind, when I heard his footsteps approaching. My heart skipped a beat, the familiar pulse of our bond flaring to life. I knew he was coming, knew that this was the moment I had been both dreading and yearning for. "Lena," he called, his voice cutting through the stillness of the night. I turned, my breath catching in my throat as I saw him standing just a few feet away. His presence was commanding, overwhelming. There was a power in him that had always been there, but tonight it was different. It was raw, unrestrained. The wolf within him, his true nature, was closer to the surface than ever before. "Maximus," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The magnetic pull between us was stronger than ever, almost suffocating. His eyes were dark with a hunger I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just physical desire. It was something deeper, more primal. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "It's time," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The Alpha bond. It's calling us." I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was it. The moment I had feared, the moment I had known would come but had tried so desperately to ignore. The Alpha bond was more than just an emotional connection. It was a force, a power that demanded submission, that demanded acceptance. "Maximus," I whispered, my heart racing. "I don't know if I can do this." He reached for me then, his hand brushing my cheek, the touch electrifying. "You don't have a choice," he murmured softly. "None of us do. The moon has bound us, Lena, and now we must face it." The air around us seemed to hum with energy as Maximus drew me closer, his hands sliding around my waist, pulling me into the warmth of his body. The moment his skin touched mine, I felt the bond flare to life between us, a searing heat that coursed through my veins. He leaned down, his lips grazing my ear, sending a wave of shivers through me. "The pack is ready," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The Alpha is awakening inside me, and with it, the pack's loyalty. But you," he paused, his lips brushing against my neck. "You are my mate, and that is the greatest power I will ever have." His words sent a wave of conflicting emotions through me. Part of me wanted to resist, wanted to pull away, but another part of me, the part of me that had been awakened by the moon's call, knew the truth. We were bound together by something far stronger than either of us, something that had been in motion long before we had met. "You will never be alone," Maximus continued, his hands moving to my shoulders, his touch firm, yet tender. "We will rule this pack together. You will stand beside me, always." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain that I wasn't ready for this? that I wasn't ready to be the mate of the Alpha, that I wasn't ready for the weight of the power that came with the bond. But then Maximus's lips were on mine, silencing my thoughts, drowning out everything but him. The kiss was deep, urgent, as though he were trying to claim me, not just physically but spiritually, and for a moment I let him. I let myself fall into the bond, into the force of the connection that had been drawing us together since the first time we met. Maximus pulled away after a long moment, his breath heavy, his chest rising and falling with the intensity of the moment. His golden eyes were fierce, his hands shaking slightly as he held me close. "We cannot fight this," he said, his voice raw. "Not anymore. The Alpha bond is real, Lena, and you are mine. Forever." The finality in his voice was like a slap to my face. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to accept the bond, to accept that I was meant to be his mate. But as the seconds passed, as the pulse of our bond reverberated through me, I realized that there was no turning back. The moon had already chosen us. Fate had already written our story. And so I surrendered. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Maximus and I had reached an unspoken understanding, a silent agreement that we would face this bond together, for better or for worse. But the weight of it was not something I could ignore. It was as though the universe itself was watching us, pushing us toward a destiny we had no choice but to embrace. Maximus was more determined than ever to prepare for the coming trials. The pack had sensed the change in him, in both of us. They were ready to follow, ready to bow before the Alpha and his mate. But the world outside the castle walls was not as ready. The tension between our families, the packs, was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. And as the days grew shorter, as the moon rose higher in the sky, I realized that I was no longer just a bystander in this world. I was a part of it, a part of him, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7, The Test of Loyalty. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting its silvery glow over the sprawling grounds of the castle. Every corner of the estate seemed to be watching us, holding its breath as the tensions between Maximus and I, and the pack at large, continued to rise. We were caught in a web of fate, and there was no escape. The moon had chosen us, and with it, the weight of expectations that neither of us could have prepared for. The last week had been a flurry of activity. Maximus, now fully embracing the Alpha within him, had been holding numerous meetings with the pack's higher-ups, strengthening alliances, setting new policies, and making sure the pack was ready for what lay ahead. But there was something different in his eyes, an intensity that I had not seen before. He had changed since the first night we had acknowledged the bond. He was no longer just the son of my family's enemy. Maximus Storm was the Alpha, and I was his mate. That much was clear. But despite the undeniable bond between us, despite the moon's influence that had drawn us together, the distance between us only seemed to grow. The weight of our connection, our fate, was too much for either of us to bear without struggle, and the pull of the pack's expectations made everything more difficult. It was late afternoon when I found myself standing by the edge of the courtyard, staring out across the land. The sky was streaked with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped lower, and the wind carried the faintest scent of pine and earth. It was peaceful here, in the garden, but there was a quiet unease in the air, a lingering tension that had settled over everything since Maximus had taken full control of the pack. The wolves were restless. I could feel it in the air, in the ground beneath my feet. They were waiting for something to happen, waiting for the final test of loyalty to the new Alpha. I had spent the morning in the main hall, speaking with some of the older women of the pack. They had once been rivals for Maximus's attention, but now they were offering advice, both cryptic and kind. One of them, a woman named Seraphina, had told me that the bond I shared with Maximus would be tested. It would not be an easy path, and the pack would not easily accept me as their Luna. "The wolves are as old as the mountains," she had said, her voice low and gravelly. "They do not bow easily, not even for the Alpha. You must prove your worth." At the time, her words had unsettled me, but now, standing in the courtyard with the fading light casting long shadows over the grounds, I understood what she had meant. The pack would test me just as it would test Maximus. Loyalty could not be taken for granted. It had to be earned. The sound of heavy footsteps behind me made me turn. Maximus was there, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that seemed to radiate from him. He was wearing the dark, tailored clothes he always wore for official matters, but there was something different about his posture, something more commanding. "Lena," he said, his voice rough, but his expression softening as his gaze locked onto mine. "We need to talk." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. There was an unspoken tension between us, something that had been lingering ever since the night of the full moon. I could feel it, like an electric current that ran through the air when we were near one another. The bond was growing stronger, and yet the distance between us seemed to widen every day. "Is everything all right?" I asked, trying to mask the unease in my voice. Maximus stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face as if he were searching for something. "The pack is restless," he said, his tone more serious than I had ever heard it before. "They're waiting for us to prove that we're worthy of leading them, and the time for talking is over. Tonight we face them. Together." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "What do you mean, face them?" Maximus's gaze darkened, and for a moment his wolf seemed to stir beneath his skin. "There is a test," he said. "It's how the pack ensures their loyalty to the Alpha. If they do not accept you, Lena, they will challenge you. And if they challenge you, they will challenge me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "They would challenge us?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Maximus nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. "They have to. It's the way of the pack. The Alpha bond must be solidified in blood, in strength. If they do not see you as worthy of being Luna, they will test you, and if you cannot withstand the test—" He let the words hang in the air, unfinished. My chest tightened. I had never imagined anything like this. I had expected challenges, yes, but nothing that would require bloodshed. Nothing that would put Maximus, and me, at risk. "But what if I fail?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Maximus stepped forward, his gaze softening as he reached out to gently touch my cheek. "You won't fail," he said, his voice firm. "You're stronger than you know, and I will not let anything happen to you." His touch was comforting, but I could sense the fear in his eyes. He was afraid that the pack would never accept me, that the bond we shared wouldn't be enough to keep us safe. I wanted to say something to reassure him, but I couldn't find the words. The weight of everything, the pack, the bond, the future we had to face, felt too heavy to bear. Maximus's hand lingered on my cheek for a moment longer before he withdrew, his expression hardening again. "Tonight we will face them. We will show them that we are the Alpha pair, that we will lead them together." The night passed in a blur of preparation. The great hall was filled with the scent of roasted meat, the chatter of pack members, and the low hum of anticipation. Maximus had gathered the elders, the highest-ranking members of the pack, and the warriors. Tonight, the test would begin. I had been instructed to stand by Maximus's side, to show the pack that I was worthy of being Luna. but the eyes that followed me around the room weren't filled with respect. They were filled with suspicion. I could feel their gaze on me, heavy and unyielding. I was the outsider, the daughter of the family they had fought against for years, and no matter how hard Maximus tried to reassure me, I knew I had a long way to go before I earned their loyalty. When Maximus stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the hall, the room fell into a hushed silence. His presence was commanding, his power undeniable. His wolf, the alpha within him, rippled beneath his skin, ready to emerge at a moment's notice. "This is my mate, Lena," Maximus said, his voice carrying through the hall. "She is the Luna of this pack, and she will stand beside me as we lead you into the future." A murmur ran through the room, and I could feel the eyes of the pack members on me, judging me, waiting for me to prove that I belonged. I stood tall, meeting their gaze, trying to convey strength, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. And then the challenge came. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, a large, imposing wolf of a man with dark, shaggy hair and piercing blue eyes. I recognized him as one of the pack's strongest warriors, a man named Darian, who had always been loyal to Maximus's father. I challenged the Luna. Darian's voice boomed, his words echoing through the hall. Maximus's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion, but he didn't move, he didn't intervene. "This is how it's done," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. The challenge was a test of strength, of endurance, and of dominance. Darian was not just a warrior, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his challenge would not be an easy one. But I had no choice but to accept it. As the test began, I felt every fiber of my being tense, every nerve alight with fear and anticipation. I had to prove myself, not just to the pack, but to Maximus. I had to show them that I was worthy of standing beside him, worthy of being Luna. The next few moments were a blur of movement, of struggle, of strength pushing against strength. I fought with every ounce of energy I had, my body aching, my heart pounding. But through it all, I felt the bond between Maximus and me, the force that had been growing stronger between us, flowing through me like fire. Darian's grip tightened on my wrist, but with a final surge of energy, I broke free, throwing him off balance. And with one final move, I pinned him to the ground, my breath coming in short, labored gasps. The room fell silent. Darian lay on the ground, stunned, unable to move. Maximus stepped forward, his eyes glowing with approval. "You've passed," he said, his voice low but full of pride. The test was over, but the road ahead would not be easy. The pack had seen my strength, but the bond between Maximus and me, our fated roles, was only just beginning to be realized. Chapter 8. The Final Trial. The castle had never felt more like a prison than it did now. The heavy stone walls that had once been a place of solace now seemed to close in on me, suffocating with every step I took. The air was thick with tension. The pack was on edge, and so was I. It had been weeks since the challenge, since I had proven my worth to the pack, but something still gnawed at me. Maximus, ever the enigmatic figure, had grown quieter since that night. Though his role as Alpha had solidified, I could see the weight of it in his eyes. He had embraced the power that came with the title, but at what cost? His shoulders were always tense, as if he were constantly on guard, and when I tried to speak to him, I found myself met with silence, the words lost between us. I had tried to push past the uncertainty, but the truth was, I was still not entirely sure of my place in this world. I had been chosen by fate to be Maximus's mate, to stand by his side as Luna, but I was still struggling to accept the role that was thrust upon me. I had become attuned to the wolves, yes, feeling their presence in the halls, hearing their whispers, their unspoken judgments. But more than that, I felt the bond between Maximus and me growing ever stronger, more unyielding. The connection that the moon had forged between us was undeniable, and no matter how much I resisted, I couldn't escape it. Tonight was different. Tonight, something was going to change. The wind howled through the courtyard as I stepped out onto the stone balcony, my heart heavy with the weight of the coming night. Maximus had not spoken much over the past few days, but there was an urgency in his eyes tonight that I couldn't ignore. The moon was full again, its silver light casting long shadows across the ground. It was as though the world was holding its breath, waiting for the final test. I could feel it in my bones. This was the night where everything would come to a head. I had spent the entire day preparing, both physically and mentally. I had sharpened my instincts, my senses heightened, ready for whatever lay ahead. But I had no idea what to expect. The final trial was not something I had been told about in detail. It wasn't a challenge of strength or endurance this time. It was a test of loyalty, of trust, of the bond between us. Maximus had made it clear that tonight would be the night we would either solidify our place as rulers or be torn apart by the very forces that had brought us together. The pack would demand a demonstration of power, not just from Maximus, but from both of us. To lead them, we had to prove that we were worthy of the title, worthy of the moon's blessing. The power of the Alpha bond would be tested, and this time it would not be a matter of physical strength. It would be a battle for our hearts, our spirits. Maximus found me standing on the balcony, my eyes fixed on the horizon. His presence was like a force, tangible and overwhelming. The air seemed to shift when he stepped closer, his body radiating with the raw power of the Alpha. "You're ready," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I turned to face him, my chest tight with emotion. "Am I?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Maximus studied me for a long moment, his eyes softening. "You have always been ready, Lena," he replied. "The moon has chosen you, and I have chosen you. The pack will see that tonight, but we must show them that our bond is unbreakable." I nodded, the words of his reassurance only partly settling my nerves. I had never been more uncertain in my life. I had always been prepared for a world of political alliances, of duty, of survival. But this bond between us felt like a storm waiting to break, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to weather it. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Maximus stepped closer, closing the distance between us until our bodies were just inches apart. "I have been ready my entire life," he said, his eyes intense. "The moon has given me power, but it is your heart that has made me whole. We are stronger together than apart." The words were simple, but they were everything. I had known this in the depths of my soul, but hearing it from him, feeling the truth of it in the air around us, made everything real. The great hall was filled with pack members, warriors, elders, and those who had sworn their loyalty to Maximus. The room was bathed in the soft light of torches, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. The air was thick with anticipation. Tonight would be the moment where everything changed. Maximus stood at the front of the room, his back straight, his shoulders squared with the weight of leadership. His golden eyes scanned the room, his gaze locking onto mine. I was standing beside him, but this time I felt a shift, a difference in the way he regarded me. It was no longer just about the bond, it was about trust. The pack was waiting for us to show them that we were worthy of the Alpha title, worthy of leading them into the future. The room fell into silence as Maximus raised his hand, signaling the start of the trial. "We will prove our worth tonight," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, not with strength or bloodshed, but with trust, with loyalty. The room was still. No one moved. The eyes of the pack were fixed on us, waiting for the demonstration of power. "I have chosen Lena," Maximus continued, his voice steady but filled with authority. "And together we will lead this pack. But first she must prove her loyalty to me, to our bond. She must prove that she is willing to stand by my side, no matter the cost." A murmur ran through the crowd. The pack was uneasy. They wanted blood. They wanted proof that I was worthy of being Luna. But I knew this was the moment where everything would be decided. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt thick, electric, as I took my place beside Maximus. "I will stand by his side," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled at my sides. "I am his mate, his Luna, and I will prove that I am worthy." The final test was not a battle of strength or skill. It was a battle of the heart. The pack had demanded loyalty, and in that moment, I understood what it truly meant. Loyalty was not about obedience or power. It was about trust. It was about knowing that no matter the trials, no matter the obstacles, we would stand by each other. Maximus extended his hand toward me, his golden eyes locking onto mine. I reached out, my fingers brushing his. The bond between us flared to life, and for a moment it felt as though the entire world stood still. The pack had seen us. They had seen our connection, and they had witnessed our loyalty, our bond. The room erupted into cheers as the pack pledged their loyalty to us. But more than that, I felt a shift inside myself. I had been chosen. The moon had bound us, but now it was our hearts that had truly tied us together. The days that followed were filled with new challenges, but they no longer felt impossible. Maximus and I ruled the pack together, our bond solidified by the trials we had faced. The pack respected us, and more than that, they trusted us. Maximus had become the alpha he was always meant to be, and I, his Luna, stood beside him, stronger than I had ever imagined. The journey had been long, filled with struggles, doubts, and fear. But we had overcome them, together, and with each passing day, I knew we were only growing stronger. Epilogue, together under the moon. The moon shone brightly that night, its silvery light bathing the world in its glow. Maximus and I stood together at the edge of the forest, watching as the wolves howled in unison, their voices echoing through the trees. The pack was ours now, united under the bond we had forged. "We did it," I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet wonder. Maximus turned to me, his golden eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "No, we will always do it, Lena, together." And as the wolves howled in the distance, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, under the watchful gaze of the moon.